Forget the shining armor, forget the tapestries, and forget the fairy tale glamour Hollywood sold you about the Middle Ages. We're diving into the absolute, unvarnished, wretched truth about the one person in medieval society who was simultaneously essential, utterly repugnant, and the ultimate outsider. You. That's right. Congratulations. You've just been born in the year 1450, and you don't get to be a prosperous baker or a simple, anonymous peasant. You were born into the one profession that makes every other person in your town physically recoil: the executioner. This isn't a role you applied for. This isn't a career choice. It is a curse woven into the thread of your very existence. Your name, your family, your future, all of it is irrevocably stained. And that stain is permanent. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan and settle in. We're peeling back the hood on the darkest job in history. So before we descend into the dark, filthy heart of medieval justice, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you don't, I promise the executioner will be coming for you next. Forget the popular fiction that paints the executioner as some mysterious, solitary figure who decided one day to pick up an axe. That's a romantic, modern lie. The truth is far more brutal. This was almost always a hereditary position. You didn't choose the hood. Your father's father earned the family's eternal condemnation. You see, the act of taking a human life, even in the name of the law, was considered spiritually polluting. It was a sin, a taint, a social leprosy. No clean person, no upstanding citizen would ever take the job. Therefore, once a family took the role, they were forever damned. They became the untouchables. From the moment you, as a child, stumbled out of your crib and spoke your first word, you were set apart. You are Wulfstan the executioner's son. That simple statement was a public death sentence for your social life. Imagine the crushing weight of that birthright. You are defined not by your character, your skills, or your intelligence, but by the cold, bloody work of your ancestors. Your entire life is a reaction to your father's acts, and you haven't even learned to walk yet. You are an outcast from the moment you take your first gasping breath. Your name is the first word people learn to spit. The physical and legal separation was immediate and absolute. You had to live in a house segregated from the rest of the town. Your home was often located near the gallows, near the city dumps, or in a specific, undesirable quarter outside the safe, clean walls. You live with the smell of death, decay, and unpurified waste because, as we'll see in part 2, you were often in charge of the waste. Now let's talk about the simple, everyday act of going to the market. You walk into the market square and the crowd doesn't just part. It recoils. They pull their children away as if you carry the plague, because to them you do. They believe you are contaminated, and even brushing shoulders with you is a spiritual risk. Try to buy a loaf of bread. The baker, who happily takes a coin from a thief or a drunk, will not take your money. Not from your hand. You must place the coin on a specific stone or wooden surface while step back and wait for him to pick it up with a cloth or a separate tool. Your touch is literally considered polluting. They will not even take your coin directly. Try to go to the local tavern for a drink. You cannot sit with the other patrons. You are legally required to sit at a specific table, often near the door or a latrine, and drink from a specific marked mug. Imagine the humiliation. You enforce the laws of the town, you keep them safe from criminals, yet you are treated worse than the lowest beggar. You are the embodiment of what they fear, and they react with sheer visceral disgust. You survive the toilet, the stench, and the social shunning. You earned a reward, right? Maybe a night of comfortable anonymity? Sorry, in medieval Europe, your life is an open, stinking wound. Nothing is comforting here. And this is where the contradiction, the core irony of your life, becomes a cold, painful joke. You are the cornerstone of public order. Without you, the entire legal system collapses. You are the final deterrent, the ultimate enforcer of the divine and state-sanctioned rule of law. Yet you are above the law in one sense, and fundamentally below it in every other. You have official status, legal protections, and a guaranteed salary, though that paycheck is stained with blood, and we'll get to its disgusting details later. But you cannot testify in court on your own behalf. Your oath is often considered worthless compared to a clean man's word. You are a legal agent, but a social void. You walk a tightrope between being the law's most necessary tool and society's most wretched outcast. A philosopher queen, like the one we'll discuss later, walked a tightrope between ideology and survival. You, the executioner, walk the tightrope between ensuring justice and forfeiting your soul. You are a critical professional, a bedrock of the community's legal system, yet an untouchable pariah. This stain is permanent. Your isolation is absolute. But the hangman's noose isn't the only unpleasant thing you'll be handling, because your main job, the one with the axe, is only half of your nightmare. The other half is what truly made your medieval life a living hell. It's what kept your hands permanently stained, your clothes permanently reeking, and your soul permanently troubled. It only gets grosser from here. Next, we look at the unholy trifecta of your other roles. Get ready to meet the master of waste, the unsanitized resume, so you've managed to crawl out of your medieval haystack of horrors, survive the marketplace shunning, and internalize the fact that you are the town's living symbol of shame. You've accepted the hood, the isolation, and the occasional requirement to chop off a thief's hand. But that part, the actual execution, is just the occasional, bloody punctuation mark in your miserable life. Your real job, the one that guarantees a paycheck and keeps you perpetually steeped in filth, is far more mundane, far more disgusting, and far more essential to the town's survival. Forget the romantic notion of the mysterious, idle figure sitting by his axe waiting for the next decree. The executioner's job description was a medieval Tinder profile swipe left moment. Everyone remembers the axe. No one remembers the pig entrails. We do. No glory, no thanks, no clean hands. The truth is, medieval cities, even the grandest ones, were cesspits. And who was responsible for managing the unbelievable levels of trash, excrement, and dead animals? The person who couldn't object, the one whose touch was already considered unclean. You, the sanitation supervisor. Congratulations, executioner. Your primary day-to-day employment is as the town's official sanitation supervisor. The title is fancy, the job is anything but. This meant cleaning the public latrines, which were often crude holes leading to the river or a simple pit. This meant clearing the massive piles of garbage and household waste that people just dumped into the streets. And this meant collecting and moving all the dead, rotting animals, stray dogs, horses that dropped dead from exhaustion, and most critically, the pigs. Pigs were everywhere in a medieval town, living in the street, feeding on slop, and serving as both a food source and a rudimentary waste disposal system. When a pig died or needed culling, guess who was called to deal with the corpse? The butcher wouldn't touch it if the animal died of unknown causes. You were called in to dispose of the body, often dragging the festering, fly-ridden carcass through the narrow, crowded streets. Detail the stench. It wasn't just a bad smell you could ignore, it was a suffocating, sickly sweet, pungent cloud of human and animal waste, offal and rot. The smell is biblical and it never leaves your clothes. Your home, though isolated, likely stank because you carried the accumulated filth of the town with you daily. Your tools were not just the axe and the rack. They were shovels, hooks, and buckets used to dredge, scoop, and haul away the accumulated filth of hundreds of people. Forget the castles and chivalry, your real kingdom is the cesspit, the town veterinarian and corpse collector. Your intimate familiarity with human and animal anatomy, acquired through your gruesome execution and torture duties, made you uniquely qualified for other horrifying tasks. Today, you're waist-deep in the local creek, fishing out old sewage. Tomorrow, you're dissecting a fever-ridden cow. You are often called to perform the lowest forms of animal husbandry, slaughtering and examining livestock too sick for the regular butcher to touch, to prevent the spread of disease. This was both incredibly dangerous and utterly thankless. You were working with infectious, contagious animals, often without any protective gear. And when human corpses needed to be handled, corpses that were unclaimed, unknown, or died of a feared disease like the plague, who was the only person who would touch them? You. You were the corpse collector. You load the rotting, stiff bodies onto a cart and take them to the mass graves outside the town. While others huddled in fear behind closed doors, you were directly exposed to the worst outbreaks, because no one, not even the church, would risk touching the fever-ridden dead if they could send the executioner instead. It's an infectious parade of misery, and you are the star, wearing a mask of isolation, surrounded by the literal residue of death. The unlikely doctor, body parts and dark magic. Here's the grim twist, the deep contradiction. Your continuous, hands-on work with the body, both living in torture and dead in cleanup, gave you a detailed, practical knowledge of anatomy that the learned university doctors often lacked. They were reading Galen. You were inside the human body, seeing exactly how the muscles attached and how the organs failed. Because of this unique, forbidden knowledge, you were often secretly sought out. Not by the public, of course, but by others practicing dark medicine, sorcery, or even by legitimate doctors looking for a specific, freshly removed organ or body part. These components were used in questionable, often macabre remedies. This knowledge granted you a bizarre kind of power. You were a pariah who possessed a key to the human body that legitimate doctors secretly coveted. You held a small, dark monopoly on the secrets of flesh, pain, and death. You've survived the filth of the morning. You've hauled the dead cow and cleaned the latrine. Now comes the part where you actually have to hurt someone, and sometimes you had to make sure they lasted a long time. The medieval executioner was a multidisciplinary nightmare, a master of filth and fear. You thought the axe was bad? Let's talk about the rack. Let's talk tools and the psychology of pain. The tools of the trade, the axe, the wheel, and the Iron Maiden's lies. You've earned your stained living as the town's chief sanitation officer and veterinarian of the condemned. Now, let's get to the work that truly solidified your reputation, the grim public ceremony that kept the town in line. The execution. Start by forgetting the myths Hollywood loves. The tools weren't always complicated. Sometimes the most efficient instrument of pain was just you. The Iron Maiden, that terrifying spike-filled coffin, was a rare post-medieval invention, an instrument of propaganda and theater more than daily practice. The real tools were simpler, more brutal, and chillingly effective. The axe, the block, the rope, and the wheel. The axe needed to be perfectly balanced, razor-sharp, and maintained with a religious fervor. The block needed to be solid, clean, briefly, and positioned correctly. These instruments, passed down through generations of executioners, represented the final, terrifying edge of the state's power. The truth is, the tools weren't the terrifying part. The mastery of them, the required precision, was the true anxiety. The art of the clean kill. Professional anxiety. A botched execution was a disaster. It was professional incompetence, an insult to the state, and a literal bloodbath for the condemned. It brought shame, riot, and immediate danger to the executioner. The crowd, there for the spectacle of justice, quickly turned into a hostile, vengeful mob if the executioner had to hack more than once. The executioner was expected to be a master craftsman of death. Imagine the psychological pressure. The victim is shaking, often drugged, blindfolded, and praying. The crowd, packed and drunk on cheap ale, is shouting, demanding speed. The drum roll is pounding. You, the executioner, must judge the neck, the angle, the force, and the precise moment of the swing, all while your hand is slippery with sweat and your nerves are frayed from the crowd's palpable hatred. It is a moment of impossible clarity amidst total chaos. The moment of truth. You need a perfect strike because your life and the town's fragile order depends on it. The torturer's toolbox, beyond the final act. But the act of execution was often the release. Your duties also involved the prolonged suffering used to extract confessions or punish dissidents. Torture. You were the state's official torturer. Your toolbox included instruments designed not to kill quickly, but to inflict unimaginable pain while keeping the victim alive for days. We are talking about the rack, the strappato, the thumb screws, and the crushing boot. This wasn't about extracting truth. It was about public display, terror, and the ritualistic assertion of state power. You had to know the human body intimately, not to heal it, but to stretch it to the very breaking point without snapping the bone, to keep the heart beating while the mind shattered. You were literally the artist of pain. And in a world where governments use mass surveillance and economic control to exert power, you were the medieval state's most direct physical tool of terror, ensuring that everyone in that square, from the richest lord to the lowest peasant, understood the cold, terrifying finality of state authority. The terror you inflicted then still echoes in modern anxieties about unchecked power and accountability. The cost of failure, the butcher's mistake. You had to be a master of all forms of death, not just the quick, clean one. The law often called for specific, gruesome, and extended punishments. You were the one who had to meticulously perform, drawing and quartering, a terrifying, multi-stage process reserved for treason. It required meticulous, gruesome preparation, ensuring the victim was disemboweled and then hacked into 4 separate parts, all while the victim was technically still alive. Burning at the stake, not just lighting a fire, but arranging the wood and kindling to ensure a prolonged, agonizing death, often to punish heresy or witchcraft. Decapitation and display. Following the beheading, you were often required to boil the head in pitch or tar for preservation, and then mounted on a spike for public display, a warning to all. The failure to perform these acts correctly meant not only a botched execution, but a potential loss of income, professional shame, and the very real risk of the crowd turning on you. A town that hated you was one thing, an angry, blood-crazed mob was entirely another. You sharpen the axe, oil the rack, and try not to think about the face of the condemned. You try to separate the man who wields the axe from the man who has to go home, because tomorrow is showtime. The day the whole town gets together to watch you work. The ultimate spectacle. Let's walk you through the longest day of your life. The crowd is waiting. The execution day. The morning ritual, putting on the stigma. You wake up in your isolated hovel, separated from the town you serve. The air is cold, still carrying the faint, acrid scent of the dump and the river nearby. Today is an execution day, a day of maximum profit, maximum performance anxiety, and maximum scorn. The breakfast is stale, the wine is cheap. You check the axe one last time, running a calloused thumb across the terrifying, perfect edge. The blade is your life and your shame personified. You dress in your leather apron, thick and stained with the residues of your sanitation work, but today reserved for a different kind of stain. You pull the hood over your head. It's a functional item, a disguise meant to obscure your identity and protect your family from direct recognition. But in reality, it serves as a literal mask of shame. It identifies you to every single person in the town, a walking, breathing symbol of the cursed profession. This morning is different. There is a weight in the air, a sense of ritualized dread. You are about to become the single most important and hated man in the county. You must leave your home and walk to the execution square. And that walk is a special kind of hell. The walk of contempt. The crowd's energy. The walk to the scaffold is not a solemn procession. It is a brutal public trial. The streets are packed. The execution of a high-profile criminal was a major event, a holiday, a festival. People traveled for miles, climbing onto rooftops and hanging out of windows. The smell is a chaotic mix of cheap ale, fried food, unwashed bodies, and the simmering tension of a huge crowd. You make your way through this throng, and the crowd's energy is a weapon aimed directly at you. They are there for the spectacle of justice against the condemned man, but their most immediate, visceral reaction is contempt for you. They don't just move aside for you, they flinch. They hiss, they spit. They pull their children closer, whispering warnings. The crowd hates the criminal, but they despise you. You are the necessary monster. Try not to smile. You feel the weight of every single set of eyes, every single act of revulsion. It is an overwhelming psychological assault, and you have to withstand it, head held high, because any show of weakness is a sign that the law itself is fragile. The executioner must be impassive, a terrifying, silent agent of the state. The condemned man is often drunk or heavily sedated to keep him docile. You, however, must be cold sober, your nerves steady and your focus absolute. The moment of truth, mercy versus professionalism. You ascend the scaffold, the highest, most visible point in the square. This is your stage. The noise of the crowd is deafening. The bells toll. The priest delivers the final rites. Your interaction with the condemned is the most complex moment of your job. You are the last face they see. Sometimes they weep, beg, or rage. Sometimes they are stoic. This is the last fleeting human connection they will have. This is where the possibility of mercy and the grim reality of the bribe played out. Did the executioner offer a final drink of strong liquor to dull the pain? Yes, often. Did the condemned's family offer you a secret purse of coins, a fee for mercy, to ensure the act was quick, the blade sharp, and the positioning perfect? Absolutely. You are forced to calculate the risk, take the bribe, and potentially face an inquiry if you're caught, or refuse and risk a messy execution that could trigger a riot. The professional requirement demands speed and cleanliness. The human moment offers a path to profit and a clear conscience. The noise of the crowd momentarily dips. The priest steps back. The moment of release is upon you. You raise the axe. You are not thinking of the man beneath the blade. You are thinking of the geometry, the weight, the necessary force. The axe descends. The crowd erupts, a sickening, morbid cheer. The aftermath. The work is done, but the ordeal is not. The crowd begins to break up, but you remain. The smell of copper and adrenaline hangs heavy in the air. The work of the butcher, the cleanup, begins immediately. You are not just the executioner. You are the disposal agent. The scaffold must be scrubbed of blood and residue, often quickly and carelessly with water and rough brushes. If the sentence required a display, you are required to prepare the body, separating the head, tarring it for preservation, and mounting it on a pike at the city gate. You have to remove the corpse, often dragging it yourself, from the town center to the outskirts, ensuring the crowd's morbid curiosity is satisfied. But the public health is maintained. The work is done. The scorn remains. The work is done. The isolation continues. You go home with the blood still staining your leather apron. You try to forget the face of the condemned man, but you can't. Because you have to feed your family, you need to ensure your wife and children who share your shame have a roof over their heads. And their struggle is the real tragedy. They are the collateral damage of your necessary evil. Let's step away from the block and into the home. Let's examine the cruel, lonely life of the executioner's family. The loneliest home in the kingdom, the executioner's family. You've survived the public ritual, the blinding hatred of the crowd, and the gruesome cleanup. You return to your home, often under the cover of dusk, carrying the stench of blood and the residue of the day's spectacle. But the shame doesn't stop at your door. It permeates the very soil your house sits on. The physical isolation of the executioner's dwelling was a medieval legal and social requirement. Your home was a gated community of one, strategically placed where society could benefit from your services but be entirely protected from your perceived spiritual contamination. This house, often called the Henker House, executioner's house or similar, was typically outside the town walls, near the gallows, or close to the city's most undesirable features, the cemetery for plague victims, the dumping grounds, or the river outflow. This isolation was a deliberate policy of fear and social control. It was a tangible mark of your pariah status. You must live in a place of death to uphold a place of life, the contradiction of your existence echoing in the silent, separate dinner you eat with your family. Finding a wife. The loneliness of the executioner was not limited to his professional life. It defined his personal one. Who marries an executioner? The marriage market was utterly closed to you. A daughter of a reputable artisan, a merchant, or a farmer would never, under any circumstances, marry into your cursed bloodline. Doing so would bring instant, complete social ruin upon her entire family. Therefore, your options were severely limited, often grim. You generally married one of three types of women: the daughter of another executioner. This was the most common scenario. Families of executioners formed their own small, interconnected social network that stretched across regions, a necessary survival mechanism. You marry into the trade, guaranteeing the stigma continues, but he's finding someone who understands the shame. The desperate widow or outcast. A woman who had been utterly ruined by circumstance, debt, or scandal, and who had no other recourse. Your security, the regular if stained paycheck, was her only remaining option. The condemned's family, rare. In some very rare instances, a bizarre form of marriage could occur as a condition of mercy or penance. The first date, as we know it, would be unimaginable. So what do? The answer immediately ends the conversation. Your marriage is not one of love or social status, but one of grim necessity, a union of two social lepers trying to carve out a meager existence in a hostile world. The children of the axe. The deepest tragedy of the executioner's life rests with his children. The stigma is not merely professional, it is genealogical. Your children are born into the same pariah status as you, trapped in the generational hell of your trade. They cannot play with the other children in the town. If they dare to approach the town walls to watch a game, they are chased off with stones and insults. They are often barred from attending the town school, forcing you, the executioner, to teach them in your isolated home. They are denied any respectable trade. Your son cannot apprentice as a carpenter or a tailor. Your daughter cannot hope to marry an honest laborer. They are confined to the family business or to similarly despised trades. sometimes becoming leather workers or public animal skinners, professions that dealt with death and filth. Imagine the shame they carry in your absence. Their loneliness is profound, a forced isolation that warps their childhood and limits their potential. You are a successful, essential professional, but to your children, you are simply the father who made them untouchable. The burden of secret shame. Despite the horrors of your day, you return to this fortress of a home. You have a wife and children who rely on you. The emotional toll is immense. How do you separate the man who just broke a man on the wheel from the father who is supposed to offer comfort? The supper is silent, often tense. You are physically present, but emotionally absent, haunted by the faces of the condemned and the relentless scorn of the town. You are trying to maintain a facade of normalcy for your children, shielding them from the grotesque realities of your workday. This struggle, the need to perform society's most violent act while maintaining a private sense of decency, is the ultimate emotional burden. This struggle connects to our own modern anxieties about inherited professional stigma. Those who do society's dirty work, prison guards, waste workers, debt collectors, often feel the heavy, if less dramatic, burden of being necessary yet reviled. The heart of your home is a fortress against a cruel world. But even in your isolation, the town still needs you. Specifically, they need your other hidden business, the illicit, grotesque economy of the dead that keeps your family fed. Let's talk about the cold, hard cash. Let's talk about the grim paycheck that kept you afloat. The grim paycheck. Your official income was one of the many contradictions in your life. On the one hand, you were a civil servant, a key official with a regular, if modest, guaranteed salary from the town or the local lord. On the other hand, the vast majority of your actual cash income came from a detailed, grim fee schedule of fear. You were paid per service rendered. The town didn't pay you a high salary to sit and wait. They paid you for the performance of the act itself. The prices were standardized, a cold bureaucratic price tag on suffering, execution, beheading, hanging. Highest fee reserved for the ultimate crime. Branding, e.g., of a thief or runaway. A mid-range fee for a permanent public mark. Ear cropping or hand removal, a specific lower-range fee for mutilating punishments. Whipping / pillory, the lowest, most frequent fee for public shaming. This guaranteed you a stable, if stained, income, a grim kind of job security that many peasants envied. You were a master of macabre economics, profiting from every shade of human despair, from a light public shaming to the ultimate bloody finale. The illegal apothecary. The executioner's house was not just a segregated home, it was a black market laboratory. Your regular work handling dead bodies, both animal and human, gave you access to materials that were fiercely sought after in the hidden, superstitious underbelly of medieval society. You were the proprietor of an illegal apothecary, dealing in the grotesque economy of the dead. You see, the medieval world, even the most enlightened parts of it, was soaked in superstition. They believed that the tools and parts of the condemned held potent magical or medicinal properties. Hands of glory, the most infamous item. The severed, dried, and often pickled hand of a hanged man was believed to be a powerful talisman that could paralyze any who saw it, allowing a thief to rob a house unchallenged. You were the sole supplier of this macabre merchandise. Human fat. Rendered from the corpses of the executed, human fat was believed to possess potent medicinal properties, especially for treating rheumatism and other ailments. Secretly, people would pay high prices for a small jar of the salve. Gallows rope. Pieces of the rope used for a hanging were considered good luck charms, particularly for gambling or protecting against misfortune. You could cut and sell these pieces after the execution. You dismantled the executed body for the state, but you also disassembled it for private, fearful consumption. You were not just a purveyor of death, but a necessary dealer in death's bizarre afterlife, the torture bribe, the fee for mercy. This is the ultimate contradiction. You profit from the town's justice, but you can also profit from the victim's desperation. You were the one person who could, for a price, subtly alter the condemned's final experience. Executioners frequently received secret bribes from the condemned's family, or sometimes even the condemned himself, to ensure an act of mercy. The quick death, a bribe to ensure the axe was sharp, the strike was clean, and there would be no agonizing second or third attempt. The minimal torture, a payment to ensure the thumb screws were applied lightly, the rack wasn't fully cranked, or the whipping was performed with less force than required. You were literally paid to mitigate the justice you were paid to enforce. This made you a crucial figure in the balance of justice and corruption. You took the risk of being exposed and disgraced for the sake of your family's financial security. The money, smelling faintly of the cesspit, the gallows, and fear, was your insurance policy against a society that refused to accept you. You are a key part of the medieval economic machine, profiting from both the state's justice and the victim's sheer desperation. But like all machines, you are eventually replaced. And the forces that replace you are clinical, emotionless, and in a terrifying way, even more absolute. You've mastered the axe and the bribe. You've weathered the hatred. Now the world changes. The public spectacle fades. Let's examine the end of the executioner's reign and his chilling legacy in the modern world. The unending shadow, from public spectacle to private shame. You've survived the shame, the filth, the trauma, and the constant fear of the medieval world. You and your family are outliers, pariahs who managed to exist at the very heart of the state's violence. But as the 17th and 18th centuries dawned, the Age of Enlightenment, a new kind of terror began to encroach upon your life: reason. The medieval executioner was a necessary evil, but he was also a spectacular one. His work was theater, a terrifying show designed to overawe the public and assert total state dominance. However, philosophers like Cesare Beccaria began to argue that the purpose of punishment was not barbaric revenge, but rather calculated deterrence. The public spectacle, they argued, was counterproductive. It either hardened the hearts of the poor or turned the crowd into a chaotic, volatile mob. The reformers didn't stop executions. They merely decided the public had no right to watch. Your terrifying, theatrical career was deemed unseemly, messy, and simply inefficient. The executioner was being pushed out of the public square and into the prison yard. He was stripped of his public ritual, his costume, and the brief, warped authority the scaffold gave him. The death penalty was becoming a private affair, and in the dark corners of the fortress, the executioner's role changed from a terrifying public figure into a whisper, a shadow. The spectacle was gone, and with it, the only thing that gave your shame a warped kind of dignity. Your life's work was no longer a performance. It was just a secret, clinical murder. Imagine the psychological shift. Before, you were a despised necessity. Now, you are a hidden embarrassment, a relic of barbarism that the Age of Reason prefers to keep behind closed doors. You have been replaced by a new kind of cruelty, the cold, unfeeling justice of bureaucracy. The rise of the clinical killer. The ultimate professional demotion came with the rise of mechanical death. The French Revolution, despite its philosophical aspirations of liberty, equality, and fraternity, introduced the ultimate symbol of dehumanized justice: the guillotine. The machine, designed by Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotin, was ironically promoted as a humanitarian reform. The logic was chillingly simple. Death should be instantaneous, painless, and, most importantly, equal. Under the medieval system, a noble might be granted the mercy of the axe, while a peasant was subjected to the horrific, prolonged agony of the wheel or hanging. The guillotine was the great leveler, rich or poor, king or commoner, all received the same swift, clinical death. The executioner, once a master craftsman of the axe, was instantly demoted to a mechanic, a lever puller. His expertise, his strength, his precision, all were replaced by a precise drop of steel. He was stripped of his craft in the last sliver of professional pride. Take, for example, the Sanson family of France. For generations, they were the royal executioners of Paris. When the revolution came, Charles-Henri Sanson, the current executioner, became the chief agent of the guillotine. He executed King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, and over 1,000 others during the Reign of Terror. He performed these acts with quiet, brutal efficiency. His fame grew, but his role shrank. He was no longer the imposing figure with the personalized axe. He was the button pusher, the man who cleaned the machine and reset the basket. The emotional toll was staggering, recorded in the few accounts that remain. A numbness, a horror at the sheer cold volume of death. His job wasn't about enforcing a moral boundary, it was about running a slaughterhouse. The executioner, once defined by the intimacy of his violence, was now defined by the emotional distance of his machine. The executioner was forced to witness his own obsolescence, becoming a small, disposable part in a huge, bloodthirsty engine. The American model and the laboratory of death, the pursuit of humane execution, didn't stop with the guillotine. It merely evolved into an American industrialized horror show designed to remove the human element entirely. This was the final erasure of the medieval executioner's role. In the 19th and 20th centuries, justice sought to become entirely antiseptic, clinical, and scientific. The electric chair, 1890s. Developed in a desperate attempt to find a method that was quicker than hanging, the electric chair was meant to be pure science. It was an immediate failure, creating grotesque spectacles of burning flesh, smoke, and prolonged suffering. The executioner was replaced by an electrician, a switch thrower. Yet the human element, the error, the moral weight, the botch, could never be truly eliminated. The attempt to make death clinical only made it more horrifyingly institutional. The gas chamber and lethal injection. These methods were the final, ultimate evolution of the clinical killer. The executioner is replaced by a chemist or a team of technicians behind a glass window. The final step is to distance the killer from the act. The medieval executioner stood in front of his victim. The modern executioner hides in a booth watching the final spasms through a pane of glass. The ultimate irony is that the more society tried to make the act humane and clean, the more horrific and impersonal it became. The medieval executioner was hated for his brutality, but his crime was in the open. The modern system performs its necessary cruelty in secret, sterile, taxpayer-funded laboratories of death, and the man who performs the act is a nameless, highly trained technician. The isolation of the medieval executioner's house near the gallows has simply been replaced by the emotional isolation of a prison guard on death row, forbidden from speaking about his duty, condemned to silence by the state he serves. The nameless footnote, the forgotten outcast. The executioner of the Middle Ages remains nameless in history, a footnote, a terrifying figure in folklore. His unique profession, simultaneously despised and essential, has been entirely dismantled by bureaucracy, technology, and philosophy. His final, profound legacy is this: he was the necessary evil of his time. He performed the one singular, repulsive task that allowed society to maintain its moral high ground. He took the spiritual contamination onto himself so that the town could remain clean. His story is a chilling indictment of human nature. Society needs its dirty work done. It needs its trash hauled, its condemned executed, its morals enforced by fear. But the moment that work is done, society recoils from the person who did it, isolating them, shaming them, and ultimately forgetting them. So what? Next time you look away from the ugly truth of how society is maintained, the soldier on the front line, the prison guard on the midnight shift, the worker in the slaughterhouse, the debt collector, remember the executioner. He stands as a towering, hooded monument to the fact that we create the monsters we need, pay them with coin and scorn, and then lock them and their children outside the city gates. We created the darkness, and then we judged the man who held the lantern. The medieval executioner may have been a monster to his contemporaries, but in the end, he was simply the most honest reflection of their collective cruelty and moral cowardice. He remains the shadow we created, and the one we try to forget.